Hey, did you thumbs up me?
Okay, yes, I thumbs up you, but this is my
Sorry.
verbal approval. Sounds good.
Sorry. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
John, will you let us know when we're recording so I can begin the official spiels?
You are all set, Jenny. Go right ahead.
Thanks. Um, Hi, I'm Jenny Way. I am the National Register Coordinator for the State Historic Preservation Office. The Amy Spong, who usually does these introductions, is unavailable this evening, so I'm going to be leading this rodeo. I wanted to start by welcoming the board and the public to the meeting, and to let you all know officially that the meeting is following the state of Minnesota's open meeting requirements. As a virtual meeting, no one is in person. No board members are gathered together in the same group, or in the same room, and the meeting is being recorded. A little housekeeping, I ask that board members mute their microphone when you're not speaking, and have your cameras on when you are speaking. We want to make sure that everyone can hear one another's and that members of the public are able to hear each of our verbal responses. All votes are going to be taken this evening by roll call, and you have already found the meeting link, but for posterity's sake, it is on the SHPO website, including the password, which is required this time because WebEx did an update to their platform and now requires it for some reason. We'll see if that's going to be true again in November. SHPO staff and Chair Dyer will all keep an eye on the chat function, so members of the public, please utilize that for questions related to the nominations. And with that, I will pass it over to Chair Dyer. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jenny. Good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board for the National Register of Historic Places. My name is Lindsay Dyer. I'm currently chair of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board. Our purpose this evening is to consider the nomination of properties to the National Register of Historic Places. As most of you know, the National Register of Historic Places is a federal list of those places deemed worthy of preservation. A nomination form has been completed for each of the properties that will be considered tonight. Each nomination form has been sent to the review board members, and each member has had an opportunity to study it prior to this meeting. The owners of nominated properties, local officials, and interested local groups have been notified of this meeting. All have been invited to send written comments about the nomination and to attend the meeting. Some of you may wish to speak this evening about a particular property. You are welcome to do so, and I encourage you to address yourself to the question of whether that property meets the criteria established by the National Register of Historic Places. These criteria are the standards by which the review board will evaluate the nominations. This evaluation is the board's only assignment. These criteria have been established by federal regulation. Copies of the criteria have been sent to owners of the nominated properties and to the other parties I mentioned earlier. A description of the National Register of Historic Places program has also been sent to them. Each of the nominations will be presented by a staff member. Persons viewing the meeting remotely will then be given an opportunity to comment. These comments should be limited to 3 minutes. The Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board will then discuss the nomination, and a vote by the board will follow. Should a nomination be determined this evening to meet the criteria for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places, the nomination will be forwarded to the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, Amy Spong. Should she agree that the property meets the criteria and that the nomination is in proper form, she will sign the nomination and forward it to the National Register of Historic Places office in Washington, D.C., where it will be reviewed once more. The process is a lengthy one, but it is calculated to subject each property to rigorous evaluation. So before we begin, I would like to take attendance and also ask the members of the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board to introduce themselves, briefly stating the role they fill on the review board and their particular expertise. We will start with Board Member Anderson.
My name is Kristen Anderson. I'm one of the architectural historians on the board. I teach in the art and design department at Augsburg University, where I have classes in art history and architectural history.
Thank you. Board Member Gladhill. I believe Board Member Gladhill is out tonight. Board Member James.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elliot James. I'm Associate Professor of History at University of Minnesota Morris, and I'm one of the historians on the board.
Thank you. Board Member Koski.
I'm board member Philip Koski. I fill the role of a historical architect on the board, and I'm a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member Levasseur. Board Member Levasseur. Okay, we'll move on to Board Member Mann. I believe Board Member Mann is also out this evening. Next up is Board Member Olson.
Hi, my name's Steve Olson. I am a member at large on the board, and I'm a practicing civil engineer.
Thank you. Board Member Sanders.
My name is Tom Sanders. I'm a board member at large, and I am a registered professional archaeologist and a blacksmith. So I know ancient technology.
Thank you. Okay, Board Member Schulke. Right, out tonight. And Board Member Solomonson. Also out. Okay, Board Member Stark.
Unmute helps, doesn't it? Hi, I'm John Stark. I'm a board member as a historical architect, and I'm a practicing architect in Minneapolis.
Thank you. Board Member White.
Good evening. I am a board member at large, and I am a historian.
Thank you. And Board Member Worcester.
Hi, I'm Mike Worcester. I'm the executive director of the Morrison County Historical Society, and I'm on the board as a historian.
Thank you. I am Board Member Lindsay Dyer. I am filling a member at large seat on the board, and I work at the Minnesota Historical Society as Capital Art and Sites Program Specialist. All right, thank you for introducing yourself, everybody. We would now like to hear from SHPO staff regarding any updates for this evening.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. We have a few updates this evening. One is good news. Both of the architectural history nominations we heard at our previous meeting have been accepted to the National Register, have been listed in the National Register of Historic Places. I have blanked on what they are because I've been so focused on this meeting. They are, shoot, Michelle, can you help me? Maybe you don't know either.
Well, like you said, we're focused on this meeting. But we will look at the agenda. How's that?
That's embarrassing. It's the Tracy
Yes,
Municipal Building at the Winona Lake Park Band Shell. Sorry about that. Maybe that's my oops for the night. I am also excited to announce that the State Historic Preservation Office has been in a multi-year development of an online app that we are currently calling MnSHIP, the Minnesota State Historic Inventory Portal. It will be available to public and credentialed users that will map all of the properties we currently have in our inventory. At present, it's 104,000 individual properties. We are excited to announce that it will go live November 16th, 2023. So shortly after November's board meeting. There will be, of course, many opportunities for us to preview that for board members, specifically the public in general. There will be tutorials and manuals and my phone number everywhere. So we look forward to you exploring that. We anticipate that it will make research of cultural resource properties in the state of Minnesota significantly easier. although we will miss everybody coming by to see us on a regular basis. In addition to that geography, it'll also have the basic data points as well as all of the scanned inventory files that we currently have in our office.
Jenny, can you repeat that number again?
104,000 properties. We're busy.
And can I just add that Ginny really deserves a lot of credit for this project. She has worked extremely hard on it. So I would just like to say thank you, Ginny.
You're more than welcome. It's a group effort. It's very kind of you, Michelle. Michelle is buttering me up because our third and final announcement of the evening is that Michelle Decker is retiring at the end of the year after 30-something years of service to the State Historic Preservation Office. She is taking her institutional knowledge and headed to the woods. And we are desperately going to miss her, no matter how many manuals she puts together about the work that she does here. I have to admit that Michelle is the reason I came here. And so I will really miss her personally. Luckily, we have her through November, this state review board meeting, so we will not have to learn how to do all she does related to nominations in the next 3 months. But David and I will be very busy trying to catch up after the new year. So send her all congratulatory notes if you get an opportunity just to embarrass her around the office, because I think it's fun.
Thank you, Ginny.
You're welcome. Thank you for your service to the cultural resources of Minnesota and me personally. That does conclude our announcements for this evening, unless, David, you have anything to add?
I do not. Thank you.
Chair Dyer, back to you.
Thank you, Ginny. Thank you, Michelle. All right. The next item on the agenda is the review of the minutes from the May 16th, 2023 meeting. Are there any corrections to the distributed minutes? If there are no corrections, can I have a motion to approve the minutes?
Board Member Stark moves to approve the minutes.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who was the second?
Steve Olson.
Thank you. Okay, we will now vote by roll call on the motion, starting with Board Member Anderson.
Board Member Anderson, I vote aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Board Member Koski.
Board Member Koski abstains. I was not at that meeting.
Thank you. Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Minutes have been approved. Thank you, everyone. All right, now we move on to the presentation of nominations with some instruction. For each nomination this evening, we are going to use the following format. There will be a staff presentation of the nomination, followed by a summary of correspondence received. At that point, I will then invite and call on those who would like to speak about the specific property. We ask that you use the chat function, or if you are unable to access the chat, raise your hand and indicate that you wish to speak. Please do not use the chat function for any other purpose. For those wishing to speak, we'd ask that you keep your comments to 3 minutes. And on to our first nomination. Our first nomination for this evening is the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass. If I'm saying that incorrectly, maybe it's Embarrass, in St. Louis County, presented by Ginny Way. Thanks, Ginny.
Jenny, you're muted.
Okay, I think I got it now. There are entirely too many buttons. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Great. First up, we have the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass, St. Louis County. Our authors are Jane Beisel and William Stevenson from Blue Planet Museum Consulting LLC and Michael Lovato of LHB. Constructed in 4 phases, the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass is located on its original wooded site just west of the commercial center of Embarrass, an unincorporated community in northeastern St. Louis County. The church is a vernacular, gable-fronted, wood-framed building with a concrete foundation. Having trouble advancing. The church is comprised of the original church constructed in 1907, an addition and portico at its south end built circa 1930, plus an addition on each of its east and north sides, built circa 1945 and 1950. On the left is a floor plan of the church. Additions are shaded in gray. At right is a current photo of the building with visible construction eras labeled. The Finnish Apostolic Lutheran faith is based on the teachings of Lars Levi Laestadius, an ordained minister of the Swedish National Lutheran Church, who worked in Swedish Lapland between 1825 and 1861. Adapting the practices of the state church to reflect his own spirituality and respond to the social isolation, poverty, alcoholism, and violence he witnessed around him, Laestadius attracted a considerable following among the many ethnic Finns who predominated the sparsely populated area. On left is a driveway from County Road 21 looking northwest. At right is a photo of a confirmation class at the church's entrance in 1946. Laestadianism was a recognized revival movement within the Lutheran state churches of Sweden, Finland, and Norway. It was widespread in the northern regions of these countries. During the 1860s, it became the most important religious movement among Finnish settlers in northern Norway and began to expand southwards through the rest of Finland. It was brought through immigration from these regions to North America, where it became a denomination in its own right. Following the Laestadian tradition, religious symbols were not displayed, vestments were not worn, and the rituals of kneeling and standing, common in other Christian denominations, were not practiced. Emulating the meeting houses of rural Finnish Laestadians, this building reflects the austerity and spiritual priorities of the Nordic Laestadian tradition. At left, we see the south facade, camera looking north. At right, we see the west facade, camera looking east. An estimated 300,000 Finnish immigrants entered the United States between 1964 and 1920. A large group of those immigrants was attracted to northeastern Minnesota after commercial iron mining began there in 1884. Until 1899, most of these immigrants came from rural northern Finland and adjacent areas, where Laestadianism was well established among the Finnish population. At left, we see the north facade, camera looking southwest. At right, we see the east facade, camera looking west. Early Embarrass pioneers worked to construct county roads in the otherwise underserved settlement before the township was formed. These individuals ultimately comprised most of the initial members of the Embarrass Township's Board of Supervisors, among other civic and commercial duties. They were also the founders of the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass. At left is the sanctuary looking north. At right is the sanctuary looking south. Cultural bias and lack of a common language limited fraternization between Iron Range residents of different ethnicities. As a result, first-generation immigrants across the Iron Range tended to form relatively tight-knit ethnical communities that encouraged intermarriage and retention of native languages and cultural practices. This was especially true for the Finnish Apostolic Lutherans, whose faith perpetuated a distinctive religious tradition with historic ties to their Nordic homeland and discouraged them from partaking in many typical aspects of American life. At left is the dais and speaker seating, looking west. At right is a confirmation class at the church's dais circa 1955. Finnish churches were a feature of every Finnish settlement and played an important continuing role in maintaining social relationships and a sense of community for the Finnish Americans who attended them. This church was the largest Finnish cultural community in the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church was the largest Finnish cultural community in the nation during the late 19th century and is the only specifically Finnish American religious group to survive into the 21st century. At left is the sanctuary addition looking west. At right is the song leader seating looking northeast. As is often true, the insulated nature of the Finnish American community in Embarrass eventually began to fade. By the 1890s, services at the church followed the Lystadian traditions of simplicity. However, they were conducted in English, and from 2000 to 2010 were limited to the summer months only. At left is the stairwell addition looking northwest from the first floor landing. At right is the storage addition, camera looking north. The period of significance is 1907 to 1969. The level of significance is local. National Register criterion is A. Areas of significance are religion, exploration and settlement, and ethnic heritage European Finnish. The period of significance begins with the 1907 construction and ends in 1969, when dwindling membership and a lack of ideological unity diminished at the church. The significance results from association with broad patterns in religious, ethnic, and settlement histories of the Finnish American immigrant. Therefore, the property meets criteria consideration A, religious properties. From 1907 to 1969 and beyond, the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass served members of a distinctly Finnish American Christian religious denomination, served as a central cultural space for the community, and is associated with the settlement and development of Embarrass Township. For these reasons, the Finnish Apostolic Lutheran Church of Embarrass is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this nomination.
All right, thank you, Jenny. John, is there anyone who has signed up to speak?
No, we have no one signed up to speak at this time.
All right, if anybody would like to comment, members of the public, please raise your hand or include a message in the chat now. That would be great. And if somebody could help me see if there's a hand raised, that would be great. I'm not sure if I can see that.
There are none that I seek.
I don't see any either.
No hands up at the moment.
Okay. If there are no public comments, we can close that section. Just one last call for any public comments. Okay. The public comment period is now closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination?
As Board Member Stark, I'd like to make a motion that we add this site to the National Register.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Board Member Sanders, I second it.
Thank you. And it is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion related to the nomination?
Board Member Stark, I do have a question. Since I think it closed in 2010, is that correct? And what is it being used for now? And it's so well maintained, it shows that it's been loved and taken care of. Just curious about the future.
Would the authors like to? Yes. Thank you, Jane.
Jane?
I got figured out how to unmute. I'm sorry. So the agreement between the congregation, the remaining members, and the Suzu Heritage, the current owners, stipulates that it will be used as a cultural center and as a just as a place for scholarly understanding of their religion, and also that the extant members or the existing members can use it as desired for funerals of the long-term members. So it has been used very little, actually, and it's a testament to the ownership that they have done a beautiful job and really do care and have done everything possible to maintain the property in pristine condition. There is a plan going forward to have small audio, small concerts, unamplified. That's the word I'm seeking. Concerts of Finnish music there, but that hasn't begun yet.
Thank you. I do have one more question for you since you're unmuted, or just a comment. I really appreciate the writing of the Finnish Lutheran tradition and everything, and I learned something in the process, so thanks.
Oh, that's wonderful. So did I. It was a very challenging nomination to research, and I was fascinated by it myself. It was very compelling. Thank you.
This is Board Member Anderson, and I want to agree with what John had to say. I thought it was a fascinating nomination, and I learned a lot and really appreciated it. So thank you.
Well, thank you.
Any other comments from the board? I don't see any hands raised. Okay, there's one. Board Member Worcester. Oh, you're on mute.
Thank you. Two questions. Number one, what makes this particular building different from and if I'm seeing this right, the 127 other buildings listed on the register in the state of Minnesota that have been identified as being a house of worship? And number two, in particular, then, is this structure unique in its cultural significance from the other Finnish Lutheran church that is on the register, which is listed in Carleton County? Thank you.
Jane, would you like me to address that?
Oh, please. Yeah.
Sure.
Be great.
So this particular building is being listed for its cultural association with the Finnish American immigrant. So when we talk about comparative analysis, we begin to think about whittling down not just religious institutions and then ecclesiastical institutions under that, but those associated with this particular ethnic group. So in that way, it differentiates itself from the other 127 properties listed in the National Register that do have an affiliation with some sort of religious organization. This is also the thing to think about specifically is that this is listed at the local level. So here, the local level is defined as Embarrass Township broadly, or the city of Embarrass, or the village of Embarrass more specifically. And so the comparative analysis becomes, are there any other structures related to the Finnish American Latvian? No, I'm sorry, not Latvian. Oh,
My sister.
yes.
I think you mean
Laestadian?
Laestadian, yes.
Thank you.
Laestadian, yes.
I had it phonetically in my notes and now I couldn't remember it. Religious communities specifically. So what we're looking at is a local level of significance, meaning that we don't have to do comparative analysis countywide even, or much less statewide. We simply have to look at the impact of this particular building and its associations on the local community. And in that way, there are a number of property types that tend to have significance, and religious buildings are one of those because they are typically cultural centers, specifically for immigrant communities. Does that answer your question?
Any other comments or questions from the board? Also, it would be helpful, I caught that hand raise on the video, but it would be helpful if you use the little icon because I can only see so many people, but I have the full list if you use that little hand emoji thing at the bottom. Okay.
Madam Chair, I couldn't get to the hand emoji because my screen split in half with the register listing. So that was why I did the old fashioned way. Thank you.
In case I miss it next time, you can just holler if I try and move on. All right. So seeing as there aren't any further comments, the motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. So those in favor say aye, those opposed say no. We will vote by roll call. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member James. Oh, Board Member James, you're on mute. You're still on mute, but I see that you're saying aye. Maybe you want to type it in the chat. Okay, Board Member James will come back to you. Or type it in the chat, please. Okay, Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
No.
Chair votes aye. And we have from the chat, Board Member James also votes aye. All right, thank you, everyone. Let's see, so now we will move on to our next nomination. Our second nomination this evening is Hackensack Conservation Building in Cass County, presented by Ginny Way.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. So this is the Hackensack Conservation Building at Hackensack, Cass County. The author is Rolf Anderson. The Hackensack Conservation Building is located along the shore of Birch Lake in Hackensack, a city in north-central Minnesota. The building is located on public land 2 blocks west of the main thoroughfare on a parcel of land known as City Park. Here's a Google map of Hackensack. The building is within the yellow circle. The one-story log and stone building was constructed for the city in 1936 by the Works Project Administration, or WPA. Over the years, the building has provided space for various community and civic functions. At left is the east and south elevations, camera facing northwest. At right is the building from the same angle, circa 1936. The Conservation Building is a T-shaped building measuring 36 feet long and 15 feet wide. The walls are built with peeled logs with saddle-notched corners that rest on a fieldstone foundation. The interior of the building is divided into 3 rooms. A room at the center that extends from the entrance through the entire width of the building, and one on each side. The interior features log walls, hardwood floors, and a vaulted ceiling with exposed log rafters. At left is the east elevation facing west. At right is the north and east elevations, camera facing southwest. Hackensack and the surrounding area was initially settled largely because of the lumber industry. But with the predominance of lakes, the resort industry soon also began to emerge in the early years of the 20th century. As early as 1905, Victor Holmberg, who was a recent immigrant from Sweden, was approached by a property owner on Webb Lake to build a number of log cabins with stone fireplaces. Demand for Holmberg's log and stone buildings increased as the rustic-style architecture gained favor in resort communities. In time, he taught his skills to his 4 sons, Vic, Fred, Gus, and Ed. After Victor's death in 1929, his sons continued the family tradition of building in log and stone. At left is Gulse Holmberg at Chimney Point, Webb Lake, circa 1950s. At right is the four Holmberg brothers from left to right, Vic, Fred, Gus, and Ed, circa 1929. In October of 1935, the village of Hackensack submitted a proposal for a grant from the New Deal's Works Progress Administration for the construction of a, quote, log cabin building to be used as a conservation building, combining a library, information bureau, museum, and tourist comfort station, end quote. The WPA formally approved the project on December 11, 1935. The village turned to the Holmberg brothers to construct the building. In the 1930s, it was typical of the brothers to work together, including the Hackensack Conservation Building. At left is the north elevation facing southwest. At center are the south and west elevations, camera facing northeast. At right is the south elevation, camera facing north. The conservation building was put into immediate use by the Hackensack community. Any group that utilized the conservation building was required to pay a small fee. In the ensuing years, the building continued to be used for social, recreational, and educational activities. In 1942, the building was turned over to the Hackensack chapter of the Red Cross for exclusive use. At left is a view of the west elevation, camera facing east. At right is the center room with stone fireplace, camera facing west. After World War II, the building returned to both public and private use as needed by the community. In 1955, the Hackensack Chamber of Commerce established an information bureau inside the building. In 2003, the Chamber of Commerce relocated. Today, the conservation building is used by a community lending library. At left is the center room, fireplace, hearth, and mantle, camera facing west. At right is a view of the center room, looking from the center room into the north room with the camera facing north. At center is the door to the south room at the left and the door to the restroom to the right, camera facing south. More pictures of the interior. At left, we're looking from the north room into the center room with the former doorway at right. That's on the right, I'm sorry. At center is the north room view through the casement windows towards Birch Lake, camera facing west. And at left is the north room, camera facing south and southwest, viewing the south and east walls and ceiling. The period of significance for this property is 1936 to 1973. The level of significance is local. The National Register criteria are A and C. The areas of significance are politics and government and architecture. The period of significance dates from 1936 with the completion of the building and continues through 1973 based on the National Park Service 50-year eligibility guidelines. The Hackensack Conservation Building meets the registration requirements for government buildings established in the multiple property documentation form titled Federal Relief Construction in Minnesota, 1933 to 1943. From construction to present day, the Hackensack Conservation Building has continued to serve the community by providing amenities and services as the WPA program envisioned. Additionally, the building is a finely crafted example of the rustic style, which was constructed by the Holmberg brothers, master builders in log and stone. For these reasons, the Hackensack Conservation Building is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There are two pieces of correspondence, both in support of listing, related to this property. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ginny. I do have a few folks that are signed up to speak, which would be Maggie McGill and Ralph Anderson. Before I invite them, John, was there anybody else that you have been alerted to?
No additional signups.
Okay, so Ralph, I will pass it on to you if you're still interested in speaking on this property.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I think we'll begin with Maggie.
Okay, Maggie.
Well, I must admit that my experience with webinars is very shady And so I had a little trouble getting on. This is a fascinating experience. I've been absolutely awed by the work that Rolf did in investigating the history of our building. This building has had a rich and full history, being many things to the community. And so you've had a chance to read the words, you've had a chance to see the pictures. What I want to talk about is heart, because heart is not expressed in those words in those pictures. And I want to talk about heart that began in 1936 when those amazing Holmberg brothers built that building, to what I've seen in the past few years since this building has become a lending library. In 2005, the birth mother of this lending library decided that when the Chamber of Commerce left, she wanted to make it into a library, much to the naysayers of friends. And she polished every log in the inside of that log cabin with liquid gold. I want to tell you about how much I love the smell of this building, because it smells like an antique store with seasoned, pampered, old wood. I also want to tell you about the people who walk into that building for the first time. We can always tell who they are because they go through the door, the original one, I might add, and they stop. They absolutely stop and look around. They look at the ceiling, they look at the floor, and of course they look at the beautiful fireplace. They're absolutely charmed. And the last thing I want to share with you is that we, as a group of library volunteers, have been rigorously fundraising because we know that this building needs some very rigorous repair work. And so this is a little note I got yesterday with a contribution, and I wanted to read it to you. It says, "Dear Library Committee, enclosed is a donation for the Lending Library. This is a wonderful little community library that we have greatly enjoyed. We know that we want this building to continue for years to come because it has provided such a treasure to our community. I thank you for giving me an opportunity to share."
Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right, I will pass it off to Ralph.
Okay, thank you. I want to start by remarking how when I embarked on this project, I thought the story would be rather straightforward, and I was amazed by the complexity of this history as it unfolded. I think namely, the number of uses, their variety, complexity, particularly this World War II history. Who would have imagined that the building would be part of a broader civil defense effort to protect the nation in the event of an invasion or other emergency? So, but I think that's indicative of how in a small town like Hackensack, even a small building can have outsized importance to that community where they don't have other resources for this wide variety of functions that have taken place in the building. I also was very pleased to develop the architecture story about the Holmbergs. Often we're unable to associate specific craftspeople with a building, or you just may know a name and the story goes no further. But it was, I think, remarkable to be able to tell their story and to credit them as master builders in log and stone. And I was able, through Maggie's efforts, to interview descendants of the Holmberg brothers, who share their historic photos, their information about the building, and so forth. So I think that was, again, another unexpected component. And last but not least, I think locating the WPA file added insight in terms of the complexity of a WPA project. One would think during the Great Depression, when the most important thing would be to get people to work, that things would be rushed through. But you can see from the documentation of the WPA and other New Deal programs are so very deliberate and careful with the dollars, that they were expending. Well, Maggie, thank you for your comments, and I have people to thank tonight. It feels like I could thank many people in the town of Hackensack. It felt like a bit of a community project, which I think is the case in a small town, starting with Mayor Kennedy and other people. But first and foremost, Maggie, who was my main contact. And this nomination, I think, is much better for her involvement and everything that she orchestrated in the course of the project. When I was conducting both the site work for the property evaluation, then the nomination, Maggie each day orchestrated a typed agenda for me, going from interview to interview, to repository, Cass County Historical Society, just like clockwork. And then my dad, Renee Geving, was very helpful as always at Cass County Historical Society. But it made such a difference to be able to really access so many people in town that had connections to this building, including even a man by the name of Burton Wolk, who's well into his 90s, but has first-hand information of the building back into the 1930s. Maggie sometimes had to shift gears quickly. We might interview one person, they would suddenly mention a building they believe was by the Holmbergs that we weren't aware of. So Maggie would quickly try to track down an owner, track down a time we could visit and see what we could learn about that building. So Maggie kept me busy from dawn to dusk, but even a little bit beyond that, it was, I have to say, it was actually wonderful. Maggie would even arrange social activities in the evenings, dinners. The mayor would come, people I'd met would come, other people associated with the building would come, and it would give me a chance to talk about the project, about National Register, about legacy funding, and also just have an enjoyable social time, which isn't something you often can fit into these projects. So Maggie made my experience, so very positive. And as I said, it felt like a community effort here to nominate the building. Finally, if the nomination is hopefully approved, this will be Hackensack's very first building listed in the National Register of Historic Places. I think that's very important. I think it gives the community a chance to learn about National Register, as well as preservation. And I think it also is a testament to the impact that legacy funding has on preservation throughout the state of Minnesota. Just like Hackensack may have needed the WPA money back in the 1930s, legacy money here today can play a key role in preserving this building so it can exist for another 90 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph. All right, are there any other members of the public that would like to speak? Anyone else, John?
No, I don't see anybody else.
Okay. All right. If nobody else is in line, the public comment period is now closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination?
Board Member Koski
makes the motion.
Oh,
Oh,
and I would second. I was going to make the full motion that we recommend to the State Historic Preservation Officer that we approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places.
Thank you, Board Member Koski. Is there a second?
I'll second. Board Member Worcester seconds.
Okay. All right. It is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion from the board related to this nomination?
I did have a question.
Okay, let's start with Board Member Koski.
Thank you. I believe this is going to be a question for Rolf. So looking at the historic photographs and then the more recent photographs, I'm convinced that this building has substantial integrity, but I'm noticing a couple of differences. One would be the irregularity of the end cuts of the logs at the corners in the original construction. I think it was 1937 or so. And it seems like at some point they might have been cleaned up. They also, it looks like they've added a fascia board, which has covered up some of the rafter ends, which I think would also be contributing to the rustic style. Do you have any documentation about when that work might have happened?
You know, Phil, not precisely. I think from a photo, maybe from the 50s, it appeared even at that point, maybe the log ends had even been cut by that point and perhaps even painted, but a lighter color, which just the ends, which had since worn off. So, but I don't have precise documentation about that. But perhaps, you know, minimally the fascia board and so forth could come off in the course of restoration work that we hope happens.
Right, right. I mean, maybe there could be more research done if there was more photographic evidence. But if there could be a notation somehow made in the nomination about those small changes, because I think they, for me anyway, as an architect, I think they're significant in conveying that style.
Okay.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester.
Thank you. Yeah, just I want to say to Maggie before I ask my question, having grown up in that part of the world, I have been in that building even before it was a Chamber of Commerce building. So I do appreciate you folks bringing this forward that way. I do have one question though. This publicly owned, has the City Council of Hackensack formally signed off on this effort? Was that necessary to have, or did they just signal their verbal support for this, knowing that they own the building itself?
I'm so glad that you asked that, because through every step, we have worked with the mayor, Bill Kennedy, and the city council. And so they are very much on board with what we're doing.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions from the board? Board Member Sanders.
I have a comment, and really, I suppose a comment to Rolf, that I so appreciate the Holmberg story that you included in this. So often the craftspeople who made these things are sort of left out of the story, and I love that story was brought forward. I vacation in that area every summer, and I can't wait to get up there and look at that building and look at the details and the small details and see how they did that. I think it's fascinating, and I wish I would have seen them build that building. I would love to have watched them build it, and I would have loved to have talked to them. So thanks for bringing in that story. I'm so fascinated with every story I've heard since I've been on the board that I think all these stories are great, and it's too bad that other people don't get to hear it more than us. I know that it's out there, but just thank you. That was a great story. Thanks for a great job.
Thank you, Tom. And well, if you're in the area, I have to recommend that you visit also the Mascot A Ranch on Webb Lake. And
I will.
Maggie, I would be happy to arrange that as well. But the Johnsons, who own the property, are wonderful stewards of this very, very complex collection of buildings.
Wow.
But it is a perfect location to see this magnificent stonework by the Holmbergs. And
wow.
It is remarkable it has survived all these years.
And I would add, because I also live on Webb Lake, that you just let me know when you're in town and we'll do the tour, because it is just stunning, absolutely stunning.
I'll take you up on that.
Show you around.
I'll be up there next July. We're up there every year in July, so
okay. I'll be up here too.
Okay.
Tom, it sounds like you have big plans for next year. If you'll reach out to me, I'll be happy to pass around email addresses as appropriate.
Yeah, thank you.
And invite your friends. They're all welcome at the State Review Board to hear these stories as well.
All right, thanks everybody. Any other comments from the board? Questions? I don't see any other hands up, so if I'm missing you, you can just shout it out now. Okay, seeing as there's no other questions or comments, the motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for this listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We will vote by roll call. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member James. And Board Member James, if you're still muted, I think you are, please in the chat. Thank you.
Can you hear me?
Oh,
hear
there
me?
you are.
Okay, aye. Sorry.
Hi. Got it. Okay. Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Thank you, everyone. Okay. The next nomination, our third nomination for this evening, is the United States Forest Service Reamer District Ranger Station, which is in Cass County. This nomination will be presented by Ginny Way.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. I'm sharing my screen now. As you said, this is the United States Forest Service Reamer District Ranger Station in Reamer, Cass County. Daniel Hoisington of Hoisington Preservation Consultants is the author. The Reamer District Ranger Station is located within the Chippewa National Forest in the town of Reamer in north central Minnesota. The station was built to serve as the headquarters for the Reamer Ranger District, an administrative unit created in 1935. The nominated property comprises the western portion of the original station property with 3 contributing buildings: the main office, the oil house, and the warehouse. At left is the nominated boundary. At right is the original parcel boundary. The remainder of the property lacks sufficient integrity to convey its historic significance, which is why it is outside of that boundary. The property consists of 3 buildings: the Ranger Station office, constructed in 1936, the oil storage house, and a warehouse constructed in 1935. At left is the north elevation of the station office, viewed to the southeast. At right is a driveway showing from the station property to the public right-of-way, viewed to the north. In 1902, 200,000 acres of pine land and 25,000 acres of agricultural land from 4 Chippewa Indian reservations was taken to become a National Forest Reserve. In 1908, the reserve officially became the Minnesota National Forest, and in 1928, the land was renamed the Chippewa National Forest, despite the lack of adequate compensation to the original tribal owners. At left is the north elevation of the Reamer Station office, viewed to the southeast. At right is the west elevation of the station office, viewed to the east. By the 1930s, the Forest Service management was evolving, including principles of sustained yields and expanded recreational opportunities with greater amounts of publicly owned land. Additionally, the aggressive business practices of lumber companies had left vast areas of northern Minnesota as cutover land, which had, quote, no value for agricultural or recreational, or anything except forest or flood control. At left is the south elevation of the office, viewed to the northwest. At right is the east elevation of the office, viewed to the southwest. In early 1935, the U.S. Forest Service began a substantial expansion of 356,000 acres to the south, including the direct purchase of 200,000 acres. Most of the South Purchase Unit land had been logged over, and nearly 80% of the land was in tax delinquency. The Forest Service established the Walker and Reamer Ranger districts on the South Purchase. In the Reamer district, James Wally, the supervisor for the Chippewa National Forest, worked with the newly hired district ranger to purchase land and initiate a resettlement program for struggling owners. In 1932, the Forest Service issued the Lands Handbook L with guidelines for constructing ranger stations. These stations acted as the public face of the forest and were intended to be both pleasing and practical. At left is an illustration of the Chippewa National Forest Ranger Districts, 1935 to 1972, with the Reamer Ranger District in the bottom right-hand corner. At right are the elevations of the building plans D9, on which the office is based. The rapid transformation of the Chippewa National Forest was completed under a new federal program, the Civilian Conservation Corps, or CCC. In total, there would be 23 CCC camps in the Chippewa National Forest, although the camps did not operate simultaneously, and in some cases, companies occupied more than one camp. The primary activities for these men was to establish infrastructure to aid in fire response, such as lookout towers, roads, and communication lines. Once those were established in a region, the men would begin reforestation. At left is the north and west elevations of the Station Oil House, view to the southeast. At right is the south and east elevations of the oil house, view to the northwest. At Reamer, the CCC company number 1762 also built the complex of buildings being listed on based on standard USFS plans. Reamer District Office was based on a standard plan 68A developed through the Milwaukee-based regional headquarters. The design for the warehouse is also based on standard plan number 14 from that regional office. At left is the north elevation of the Reamer Station warehouse, view to the southeast. At right is the south elevation of the warehouse, view to the northwest. Over the 36 years that the Reamer District operated, the ranger was responsible for land and timber surveys, land acquisition, fire protection, pest control, erosion work, fish restocking, wildlife activities, and the maintenance of the Forest Service truck and trail roads. The Chippewa National Forest consolidated its districts in 1972, combining Reamer with the Walker and the Deer River districts. That year, the property was transferred to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and served as the Mississippi Headwaters Office. Following the consolidation of the Corps, in 2006, the federal government sold the remaining property. At left is the interior of the warehouse, first floor, view to the northeast. At right is the interior of the warehouse, first floor, view to the southeast. The period of significance for this property is 1936 to 1972. The level of significance is local. National Register criterion is A. The areas of significance are conservation and politics and government. The period of significance dates from 1936 with the completion of the building and continues through 1972 when the Forest Service consolidated stations and sold the property to the Corps of Engineers. Reamer District Ranger Station meets the registration requirements for government buildings established in the multiple property documentation form titled Federal Relief Construction in Minnesota in 1933 to 1943. Built in 1936 by the CCC, the Reamer District Ranger Station played a significant role in the expansion of the Chippewa National Forest during the New Deal. Over its years of operation, it served as an administrative center to carry out the Forest Service programs of timber sales, etc. For these reasons, the United States Forest Service Reamer District Ranger Station is eligible for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. There is no correspondence related to this property.
Thank you, Ginny. John, is there anybody signed up to speak?
No, we have no signups.
Okay. Is there anyone from the public who is interested in commenting on this nomination? I don't see anybody with raised hands or comments in the chat.
I do.
Oh, you do?
Chair Dyer, yep, Dan Hoisington.
There you are. I'm sorry. Thank you. Okay, Daniel.
In looking at this, the property didn't have the beautiful rustic architecture, but you gained a sense of how important this was to the area. The dire poverty during the Great Depression in these northern counties, a third of the people being on emergency relief, the collapse of the logging industry, people were not paying taxes, so the county had no income, and property would revert to them, and they had no ability to sell it. So the importance of the Forest Service to come in the midst of this to create these stations in Chippewa National Forest had a major impact in both restoring the forests in the area and the industry, but just to bring it out of that dire poverty. What always struck me about this particular station is when there was a round of closure, the reports from the USFS staff said that out of the ones proposed for closing, Reamer would be perhaps the most difficult to vacate. It was right near town, and it became a popular spot for the small loggers that took over and really ran the logging industry in the area. And you get that sense of, when you talk to the people who were involved, that it was a place where you would go and hang out for a while, talk about the industry, and in that way it continued its importance up until its closure in 1972. It struck me, in case this question comes up, it is privately owned. And I give a lot of credit to Pat Beers Block, who pushed to have this placed on the National Register. There's no carrot of legacy funds. It's because of a love of history and wanting to see this building and this complex preserved. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, any other public comments? I don't see any other hands. Jenny, do you see anybody else? No. Okay. All right. It looks like we're at the end of that list, and the public comment period is now closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination?
Board Member Sanders, I move that we nominate this to the National Historic Registry.
All right, thank you, Board Member Sanders. Is there a second?
Board Member Koski seconds.
All right, thank you. All right, it is moved and seconded. Is there any discussion related to this nomination from the board? Board Member Koski, you're up.
I just wanted to point out that when I was 15, my family moved to Federal Dam, which is on the northeast corner of Leech Lake. And I graduated from Northland High School, which is across the street from this property. And I think I've learned more by reading this nomination than I did 3 years of high school. So I appreciate all the information that was in the nomination.
Thank you. Board Member Sanders, you have your hand up.
Yeah, I have a question about, I think in this nomination and also in the nomination for the Finnish church, that they were both listed as having no style. Is that a thing on the nomination form? It seems kind of like, well, they do have some sort of a style.
They do. The National Park Service has a very limited list of official styles that can be incorporated onto their form, which is why the authors like Daniel and Jane go through so much effort to make sure that they're adequately described in Section 7. Yeah, the drop-down menus available to the form are very, very limited.
That's what I kind of figured, but I'm just curious. It doesn't seem very descriptive.
They are not, no.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Worcester.
Yes, thank you. I just want to verify with Daniel, you said the owners of this property are completely on board with this property being nominated for the register. Did I hear that correctly?
Absolutely. She's watching in this evening, in fact.
Okay, good. Because as somebody who grew up just down the road, also from Reamer, I can tell you I was completely unaware of this property, and this has been nice to see too. Was there any issues? Not issues. I'm sorry, wrong word. Did this require any sign off by the Leech Lake Band Tippo by chance, or was this not in the boundaries of the reservation?
This was not in the boundaries of the reservation.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Board Member Sanders, do you have another comment or question?
No.
Okay, all right. Any other comments or questions from the board? Okay, I don't see any hands. Just speak up if you have any comments or questions. Okay, the motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer approve the nomination for listing in the National Register of Historic Places. We will vote by roll call. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member James.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair votes aye. Okay. Now, our final presentation for this evening is the recommendation for removal. The recommendation for removal is for the Peterson-Biddick Seed and Feed Company in Wadena County. This item is presented by Ginny Way.
Thank you, Chair Dyer. This is the Peterson-Biddick Seed and Feed Company, Wadena County. The author is Emily Gansell. According to Title 36 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Section 60.15A1, a property is removed from the National Register of Historic Places when, quote, the property has ceased to meet the criteria for listing in the National Register because the qualities which caused it to be originally listed have been lost or destroyed, end quote. The Peterson-Biddick Seed and Feed Company in Wadena County was raised in 2011. The photo at upper left reflects the property when it was nominated in 1988, while the image at the lower right shows the parcel where the property once stood. Because it has lost the historic qualities that made it eligible for listing, the property must be removed from the National Register. We have no correspondence related to this removal. That is all.
Thank you, Jenny. Is there anybody from the public that would like to comment? Don't see any hands. John, do you see anybody?
Nope, nobody signed up, no hands.
All right. Seeing as that's so, we'll just call the public comment period closed. In order for the board to discuss, may I have a motion regarding this nomination or this recommendation for removal?
I so move that it be removed.
Could I ask for a little bit more clarification?
I recommend that the board follow a resolution to remove this property from the National Register.
All right, thank you. Is there a second?
Second, Board Member White.
All right, thank you. All right, moved and seconded. Is there any discussion regarding this recommendation? Board Member Stark.
Just one question, and I know we've done this a few times. When a building is going to be demoed, is there a demo permit that goes in that the state review board or the SHPO would receive notification of it? There's nothing, it just happens, right?
No, there is a state law. The entity issuing the demolition permit, the responsible governmental unit, is supposed to follow a procedure set forth by the Environmental Quality Board called an environmental assessment worksheet when a property that's listed in the National Register is demolished in whole or in part. That gives the public, including the State Historic Preservation Office, 30 days to comment on the demolition. This happened in 2011. I have no record of our office commenting one way or the other. However, the demolition proceeded, which is typically the case. So.
Usually by that time, it's too far gone to do much of anything. So that's
what
I was wondering about. Thank you.
Certainly. Yep.
Any other comments or questions from the board? All right, Board Member Worcester.
You're on mute.
Oh, you're on, yeah.
I'm sorry, I thought I turned my microphone back on. New to this, so I'm just asking a simple question.
Sure.
The time lag between when this building was raised and that we are seeing this now, is that typical, or does that just depend on property owner, demo permits being pulled? What? Just curious.
Yeah, of course. It has, in this particular case, it's a couple of factors. So we are often only informed of demolition well after, because it comes to our attention through a member of the public. So there is no formal way for the public or cities to communicate with the State Historic Preservation Office about non-extant listed properties. In this case, and in a few more you will see in the coming meetings, the State Historic Preservation Office contracted with Emily Ganzel, I'm going to say a decade ago, to go through and officially do removal documentation for a number of properties, I think 20, and they are being processed as we are able to. So part of the lag, about I'm going to say 4 years of the lag, was entirely on the office's ability to process. The rest of the lag had everything to do with our not knowing that the building was actually non-extant. So with luck, we'll move these faster, but it really comes down to the fact that the building is already gone. We process them as they come up and as they're needed according to other regulatory requirements. So. Also, it's sad, so we don't like to bring you 6 or 7 at once because it feels sad.
Thanks, Jenny. Anybody else with any board members with comments or questions? Okay, I don't see any hands up. Therefore, the motion before the board is to recommend that the Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer accept the removal of this property from the National Register of Historic Places. We will vote by roll call. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, please say no. Board Member Anderson.
Aye.
Board Member James.
Aye.
Thank you. Board Member Koski.
Aye.
Board Member Olson.
Aye.
Board Member Sanders.
Aye.
Board Member Stark.
Aye.
Board Member White.
Aye.
Board Member Worcester.
Aye.
Thank you. Chair votes aye. Thank you, everybody. Okay, this concludes the presentation of nominations and recommendation for removal section of our meeting. Are there any other additional business items to discuss from the SHPO staff or board members?
There's nothing from the SHPO staff, but I see Board Member Olson has raised his hand.
Yeah, Board Member Olson.
It's sort of a philosophical question for Jenny here, I guess. Tonight we talked about CCC and WPA properties, and we're in the midst of an IIJA funding stream for new projects to be constructed around the state. Is there an opportunity to build a historic context as the funding and projects roll out for IIJA instead of waiting downstream to put something together?
You're welcome to begin recording the history of that program now, should you choose. It will take roughly 50 years for us to understand the impact that those projects have on the built environment specifically, and understanding whether or not that program was successful. Certainly, I would anticipate that if 55 years from now, historic preservation is alive and well, which of course I hope that it is, we will be looking at those projects in the same way that we look at current or the World War II federal relief projects, the Depression era federal relief projects. So yeah, keep it coming. I mean, we've listed things for the urban renewal funding that's come in through the United States government. So I don't anticipate that historically this is any different. I would like to wrap my head around the things of the 1980s before I begin to tackle the things of the 2023s. But, you know, Steve, if you're up for it, let's do it.
Well, it seems like electrification, electric vehicles, and all that infrastructure is going to be key going forward. And so, anyway, just
you want to have a fun philosophical conversation. Let's talk about how the pandemic changed shopping and commerce. I will never again list a commercial entity, a big box store, without those 9 stalls where people bring your stuff to you.
Okay.
It's fascinating.
Okay.
Maggie, I see
I
that you
have a
your
question, probably for Ginny.
Sure.
The 3 properties presented tonight were all accepted for Historic National Register. What happens now?
I'm so glad you asked. So these documents will be processed by our office, meaning that we will make sure that they're in acceptable order to be presented to the Amy Spong, our Deputy State Historic Preservation Officer, and the department chair of the State Historic Preservation Office. She will review them again to make sure that they're what the regulations call adequately documented and appropriate. We will then send them to the National Park Service, where their National Register staff within the Department of Interior will review the documentation, and the keeper of the National Register will formally notify, and then presumably and with luck list the property. So the timing of that, we usually take 3 to 4 weeks to process the nominations, and then they get 45 days from the date of receipt.
Well, that is just exactly what I was looking at in terms of time. Now, will we, the individual building sponsors, receive that word? Or will you receive that word and you share it with us, or both?
We will receive that word and we will share with you. So we will get an informal notification from the National Park Service, which I tend to share with the author so that they can share the good news with their client, because they're the ones that ultimately have done the amazing amount of work specifically on these 3 nominations. They're all very well written. So they will share that information with you. Our office will also send you an official letter if you were the owner of the property.
Wonderful. Well, this has been a delightful experience for me. It was so enjoyable to have a chance to share with you my love of this building, and I wish us all well in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Maggie.
Maggie.
Any other comments from the board, or Ginny, David, Michelle, anything else? If not, do we have a motion to adjourn?
Everybody's so shy tonight.
I'll make the motion.
Who is that?
Board Member Worcester makes the motion.
Okay, wonderful. This concludes the Minnesota State Historic Preservation Review Board meeting. Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Thanks, Sean.
Good night.
Good night, all.
Night.
Thank you.